So welcome all of you, and welcome to all the people who are attending. I'm looking at familiar names. It seems people are here from all over the world. So very quickly, I just wanted to introduce myself again. I know that many of you were waiting for Professor Fiona Murray, the Associate Dean of Innovation and Inclusion. Unfortunately, she is stuck on a plane. Some of the issues that come with traveling during a global pandemic. So we're here today to celebrate Women Entrepreneurship Day. And I think globally, a lot of organizations and individuals are honoring and celebrating women entrepreneurs and the contributions that they've made to innovation and entrepreneurship around the world. And I think over the years, we've seen a very steady increase in women-led businesses. My region in particular, the Middle East specifically, the Gulf region has seen a specific rise in women in tech. However, I would say in spite of what many would see as wins, we recognize that there remain a lot of disparities when it comes to women and the access to venture capital that they have. At the Lugadam Center, we focus on entrepreneurship and emerging markets, and we believe that venture capital has an extremely critical role to play in creating not just sustainable economic growth, but growth that is also inclusive. And a part of that is ensuring that we do achieve gender equality. And as I said, access to early stage funding is extremely critical to the growth of a business. And what we've seen over the years, and specifically this year, we've seen a decline in access to venture capital for women after seeing a very slight increase for the past couple of years prior to the year that we're living in a global pandemic. We have with us today an amazing group of panelists. All of them are venture capitalists, all of them doing amazing work. We have Heather Henyon. She's the general partner and founding partner of Mindshift Capital, and also a very dear friend and somebody I respect enormously for the work that she's done to advocate for women entrepreneurs, specifically in the Middle East and also globally. We have Claire Diaz-Ortiz, who's a partner of Magma Partners and an award-winning author who's done written a book on the importance of mentorship, which I plan on asking you about later in the panel. We have Sharkawy, who's the co-founder and managing partner of Material Impact Fund, with years of experience working in the healthcare space. And we have Hian, who's a founder and general partner of Openspace Ventures based out of Singapore and a serial entrepreneur himself. I really wanted to start the conversation very quickly with one simple question to all of you, which is, why did you join this panel? You know, I asked you all to join and you immediately cleared your schedules, but why did you think it was important to do a panel on Women Entrepreneurship Day that addresses specifically the issue of venture capital and gender equality? Hian, you took your mic off. I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, because it's 2020. You know, it should be the case. Just a quick introduction. Thanks for inviting me on the panel. I'm based in Singapore. My firm is a generalist venture capital fund. So we don't have a gender lens per se, but we found some of our greatest and best investments have been led by women folk. And I'm a Series A investor. And so we have a 400 million AUM. So we're a sizable, meaningful investor. And 30% of my team, our investing team, are women folk. So, it's 2020. This should be the normality. Why are we even talking about it?
Heather?
Yeah, 100%. I think, well, one, Dina, I joined because you asked me and I had to accept, but if I ever wanted to see you again, but yeah, no, I think, I think, yes, it is. I totally agree with Hian. I mean, I think, yeah, it's frustrating that it's the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And it's like we're caught in this. I mean, I'm a big Excel junkie, so like a circular reference where we can't get out of it. And it's just, I mean, all the data points. I've been involved in gender lens investing now for, I guess, 7-8 years. And I see all of the things that we talk about firsthand, in my own portfolio of 100 companies, 65% of them have female founders. And yeah, I don't know how we change the mindset of more investors to get them to focus on female founders and really increase access to capital for them. Because it's a no-brainer as an investor. So I say this not as just as a straight VC investor, not as a woman, but just I don't know what it will take to change the paradigm that we're in.
I'm hoping that we'll get more to that during the panel. Adam, you've been shaking your head. Please don't say that you're also here because I asked you.
No.
With Adam, I was in front of him and I said, take out your phone, block your calendar.
No, I mean, first of all, Dina, I want to thank you for inviting me to this discussion, because it's a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. And it's a pleasure to participate. So first, I just want to speak for Hian and myself when I say, never has the expression feeling like the odd man out really had such significance, especially in the presence of such an impressive set of panelists. But the reality is, and we'll get into all of this in more detail later, women receive maybe 3 to 4% of venture capital globally, and yet we're seeing better financial performance on the revenue side. We're seeing better performance on the returns. It just obviously there's a major discrepancy here, and it needs to be addressed. And at the end of the day, we need to get to a stage where it's like Hian said, it should be a stage where we're not having to artificially have discussions about it and try to create programs in place and experiences to really be consciously aware of it. But in the meanwhile, I think we have to spark it. We have to begin that spark. And these kind of conversations, I think, are a great forum.
Right. Claire, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, I think talking about it is more important than ever, honestly, because the numbers are worse than ever. I've spent a lot of the last month working on some research for my new book on female founders and funders, and it's really devastating. It's not 3 to 4% now. We're back down at 1.8%, which is basically where we were about 12 years ago in terms of money just given to female founders and all female teams. And it's just devastating, and we've got to talk about it, because this isn't a social impact thing. This is a business thing. We have all the data showing that investing in diverse teams is better for returns. So why are we not doing it?
Right. Thank you, Claire. So Heather, I want to switch to you, and also to the audience. I urge you to write questions that you have for the panelists in the Q&A box, and I will be getting to them later on in the panel. But keeping on the topic of data, Heather, to Claire's point, we saw a decrease in venture capital funding to women entrepreneurs this year. In Q2 of 2020, female-led ventures received 1.8% of all funding in US-based deals, hitting a 3-year low. And you and I talked about this. We were celebrating, the 1%, 2% increase in funding going to women, which we saw go right back down again. I want to ask you, why do you think this recent downturn has come about after we were slowly seeing this and I keep saying this, very small increase in numbers, right?
Yeah, no, I think a few things have happened and globally, not just in the US, but really across the world. I think one, a lot of working moms, especially, which, again, that's what women entrepreneurs are. They're working. A lot of them are mothers also, in addition to working, but really got hit with the homeschooling hard. So, and I saw this in my own family, where my husband and I are actually he's an MIT alum, where, we're, I would say and we met in business school, do our MBAs at Cornell. So, we're very, I would say, we try to co-parent, he's very open-minded and, feminist even, I would say. So it's not, I think it's just the reality is women still share the brunt of the kind of the responsibilities for the families, the household. There's so many data points beyond just, women entrepreneurs, but even the workforce, women getting hit hard with just, kind of social expectations at home, cooking, all of these things that are still just fall predominantly on women's shoulders. So I think being an entrepreneur, for those who haven't experienced it, I was a founder before becoming an investor, but yeah, it's 200%, right? you can't kind of do it half-assed. It's not something, I mean, I think corporate jobs are, there's a lot more flexibility and the amount you work. When you're an entrepreneur, you're really the intrinsic driver of the business. So when you've got other constraints on your resources, on your time, your energy, your day, it's really, really hard to balance. So I think that was one dynamic. And then the other thing that I observed, and there hasn't been much discussion about this, so hopefully I'm not the only one who experienced it, but I really think, and I heard this a lot from portfolio companies and the female founders who whose boards I'm on and who I talk to almost daily, just the invisibility issue. So women became invisible. I started seeing so many more of these mantles, on webinars, online, and it's like we just sort of disappeared from the economic discussion and discourse and business that was happening. So I think, unfortunately, a lot of our relationships, it was harder to create new ones in this virtual world that we live in, and a lot of the networking that women have a harder time accessing, kind of regardless of COVID, that just became much more pronounced during this. And so, we kind of reverted back to where things were before. And, even the whatever 2% increase, which is still ridiculous given that the number of female founders there are. I mean, Dina, you and I have talked about this, but my experience in the Middle East, where I've lived the last 15 years, is 50% of the founders, I think, are women. So how can they get 2% of the capital? It's just ridiculous.
Definitely on the rise. So Claire, I want to switch to you. And, as Heather just said, female entrepreneurship is on the rise around, in emerging markets around the world, but also here in the US and in Europe. We're seeing a rapid increase of female-led businesses. I'm an entrepreneur myself. And, I was talking to a friend last night who was saying, why do you get so passionate about this? And I said, starting my own business was truly one of the most difficult experiences that I went through, difficult on so many levels. And, if I had to work all the time, women tend to have to work 100 times harder to walk into a room and be taken seriously by an investor, or to be taken seriously by their clients, and so forth and so on. But I want to ask you two really quick questions. One, what are the opportunities? Why should people really be focused on investing in women? But also, what are some of from the research you've been doing lately, what are some of the true structural barriers that we're seeing? Because I think oftentimes people say, oh, if we just have some good discussions and tell VC fund managers to invest in women because it's good for business, they'll do it. We're still not seeing real changes in numbers, which makes me feel that there are serious structural issues that we need to address, such as some of the things that Heather talked about with regards to how women carry the brunt of the work at home, for example. So I'd love to give you the floor.
Sure. So, I think one of the most fascinating things to me sort of in the last month of really digging into some new research is just that while it's true that we say that we've slowly seen an increase in women on mixed teams over the last 12 years, the reality is, in terms of dollars to all female teams or solo female founders, we are no better than we were 12 years ago. And I think this was surprising to me as someone who researches this and works in this space. So I believe very firmly that this really needs more looking into, and we need to promote more awareness of this as an issue. Because basically, I think much of the efforts and the initiatives that we have created have pretty much only gone to help women when there is still a man in the room in terms of a mixed founding team, which doesn't really address a lot of the inherent biases that we're facing. We now have the data, data after data point can show that when you have an all-female founding team, or women on a founding team, or women in your executive team, you're going to have higher profits, better revenue, better ROI, you're going to exit faster and at a higher valuation, right? So this stuff is not in question. What is in question is our own behaviors. And we all, I think from 2020, probably are a bit more familiar with the idea now that, bias is inherent in many of us. Some researchers say if you don't have bias, you don't have a brain. It is good to be aware of our bias and to work on those. But the reality is that the best way to be able to invest in different looking founders is to have different looking investors on the other side of the table. And again, we get back to data. So when you talk about women, a female investing partner is 2 to 3 times more likely to invest in a woman, regardless of the industry that that female founder is pitching. So that is really the fastest way to increase female founders and ultimately increase ROI to our own venture funds. I think that one final thing I'll say, this morning I was kind of woke up and was going through Twitter as usual, and I saw a great tweet from Hunter at Homebrew. And he said, just in the last, I don't know what period of time, maybe month or something, 3 of their portfolio founders have had babies. And they're all women and they're all CEOs. And, he just made a comment about how you can't be what you can't see. And this is one of the things that I've talked about a lot with the entrepreneurs in my portfolio. I'm in Latin America. And one of the unique things we have in Latin America is that fintech makes up about 30% of all VC investing down here. And women actually over-index in Latin America in terms of female founders. Up to 5 times more founders of fintech companies in LATAM are women. And, I was asking one of my female founders, because I've been asking everyone, why is this? Why is this? And I really think the best answer I got was from one of my great female founders who has a women's bank who's killing it. And, she said it's because we are able to see other women doing this in our region and in our industry, which is true. So, yeah.
Role models, we need more women.
Totally.
Yeah, completely relate. Adam, I want to switch to you. Sticking again to data. We're MIT, so we love data, but we have seen growing evidence that women-led companies actually outperform their male counterparts. And a recent study showed that startups founded by women generate 2 times the amount of revenue per dollar. What percentage of your portfolio companies are women-led? And you actually invested in one of our the Legatum Center female fellows as well. And do you actually consider diversity in your portfolio to be a competitive advantage of your fund?
Yeah, no, first of all, yes to comment on your first assertion. And I'm not sure if it's the same study that I'm thinking of, but there was actually a mass challenge BCG study that concluded that women-founded companies didn't just generate 2x per dollar invested, but actually 2 times the return that men-led companies generated per dollar invested. And that to me is even more interesting. And the study, that focused on mass challenge cohort also found that women-led companies, generally make greater revenue. About 10 to 15% greater revenue, and women-led companies are more accurate also to their pro formas that they pitch. But that's all for this mass challenge accelerator data. Let's actually talk about the more pertinent stuff regarding the emerging markets. Because there was a study conducted by, I think, WeFi and the IFC that showed for every $1 of pre-acceleration equity, females generated 40 cents of revenue, where no such correlation existed for males, for the male counterparts. And then for every $1 of debt, females generated $1.12 of revenue versus 54 cents among the male counterparts. So again, a lot of data to support what you were just saying. So all this should be taken within the context that we talked about earlier. Women-led companies, receive such a low proportion. Before Claire hits me in the arm again and corrects me from 3% before to 1%, but in general, it's low single digits. It's unacceptable. So getting back now to your material impact question. Needless to say, with all that data, yes, we do consider diversity to be a competitive advantage. Out of our 15 portfolio companies, just to be more specific, we have just under half of them are actually founded by female founders. And just over half of them have women in the C-suite. And then if you add the dimension of diverse and immigrant founders as well. Roughly 2/3 of our portfolio companies have that mix. So, we definitely feel diversity is a competitive advantage.
And was that something that was intentionally built in as a strategy in your fund, or was it that, these were good businesses and you just went after them?
Both. I think, and maybe we'll get into this a little bit later, but if you look at the makeup of material impact, we are, almost by definition, diverse. And you'll see that, and I'll talk a little more about this later, so I don't take too much airtime, but it's completely integral in our makeup, as well as our investment philosophy. And maybe when we speak also about LP programs and so forth, I'll talk about certain kinds of experiential sessions that we're involved in as well, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah, fantastic. Hian, you and I have spoken a little bit about your fund, and Asia has its own very particular culture, and we've talked a little bit about Latin America, we've talked a little bit about the Middle East, and Adam invests largely here in the US. But in your team, in your fund, I think you've intentionally built a team that is comprised of women partners and employees. I'm curious to know if you've seen how, live, the makeup of your decision-making team, has that actually had an impact on your investment decisions and the investment or the decision-making process that your fund follows?
Yeah, so as a background, I think one of the core tenets of the venture capital fund that I founded was diversity. And the reason for that is Southeast Asia as a region is a bit closer to Europe than, say, Japan or China or Korea, which is commonly seen as sort of Asia. Southeast Asia is 600 million people. 600 million people, more than a dozen countries, speak so many different languages. And it has been the region that has been promising the birthplace of many new billion-dollar companies, right? So we've had the fortune of investing in a $10 billion company like Gojek. We were one of the first investors there. We've gotten other companies in the fintech space and also in the health tech space that are getting close to that size. And a lot of the issues were that you have to deal with 300 million Indonesians and 70 million Thais and 6 million Singaporeans. So there's enough sort of middle-aged Asian guys on the team. That's me. I got that represented. So one of the first things I wanted to do was to create a venture capital fund that was diverse. So I actually have a principle that if we're going to invest in Philippines, we should have a Filipino colleague who could speak Tagalog, and we have 2 Vietnamese. And along the way, it turns out that because the DNA of the firm is about diversity, we just got really, really amazing investors who end up being women folk. But the other thing that was very interesting is all of us are at the life stage. I have 3 kids. My partner Shane has 3 kids. We all have kids. And so we've had so many people, fathers, right, who've had kids. And now we have women folk who have kids. My head of ESG, Jacqueline, is on the line. We hired her when she was like 4 months pregnant. And she was like, have you got a nursing room? So yeah, we have a nursing room. But we were like, these are very simple things. I think it's an adherence to this idea that diversity is a competitive advantage. And it ended up that for Fund 1, we invested into 3 companies which are female founded. And that represents 31% of our entire portfolio count of our Fund 1. Just to give you a color of that, one is a female clothing company founded by 2 unbelievable women folk. When we did that investment, it came down to that and 3 sort of MBA students who are male, Asian male. And the MBA crew really knew how to do the numbers. The 2 women folk were just hustlers who knew how to sell clothes. And I went to the investment team and I said, what do you want to do? Invest in guys who know how to do PowerPoints or women who know how to sell clothes? Come on, let's go for that one, right? And I think that's a conscious effort to get back to fundamentals about what business building is all about. The other one, actually, point, is actually a very hard-charging female fintech founder. And then the last one started a kitchen equipment, so kitchen domestic device, a smart appliance with her husband, and it's a husband and wife team. So I think Asia has very different dynamics from what I hear, but I can't speak for the rest of the VCs, but for us, we felt that the secret sauce was diverse. I'm appropriate for this forum because it turns out that the numbers, thank God, skewed in the right ways and not 2% or 1%. So that's how we look at it.
Yeah. I'm going to ask a question, to both Adam and Hian. And I don't think that the two of you are necessarily the norm of what we see out there. We often see venture capital funds that are led by men who create investment committees that are all men and whose portfolios are comprised by largely male leaders or male entrepreneurs. The question I have for both of you, and then I'd love to also hear Heather and Claire's comments as well. And this is not at all to put you on the spot, but really, we said from the beginning that we would make this a really honest conversation. Amongst your peers and other venture capital funds that you interact with and other fund managers that you interact with, do any of you either talk about with other fund managers who are men the importance of investing in women and some of these really striking low numbers and the role that you can all be playing in really balancing things out? Are these conversations being had? I mean, we know they're being had amongst women, right? But we're still the minority. I'm also a partner in a venture capital fund, and us female fund managers, that's also a really tiny, tiny part of the pie. And we talk about it all the time. I'm just curious to know if you guys do as well.
I can jump in real quickly. I mean, I'm part of an initiative with the New England Venture Capital Association that focuses on that very topic, Dina. So there's an official forum to talk about this, not only talk about the current state of affairs, talk about the current numbers and data to provide where we really need to go, but then to put some actionables behind it. And so definitely use forums like that to do exactly what you said. But I will say also that, and you said, earlier to have honest, straight talk. And I think the reality is, and I really believe this, is that when it comes to, really taking a 360 view in developing, innovative technologies into a business, I sincerely feel that women have and I'm going to stereotype here, but women have a better 360 view because I generally find them to have better decision making, higher EQs, and this ability to really rationalize between things, as opposed to sometimes, I think Claire mentioned that we always have to be fairly cognizant of our biases. I think women have a better ability to be cognizant of their biases than men do. And so as long as we understand that we have that radar screen, they're able to address it more proactively. So for all those reasons, I actually think that there's a lot of supporting evidence that I like to use in my conversations with other male-led venture firms. Yeah.
Hian, did you want to jump in?
I haven't had this conversation with my peer group. I mean, maybe I just haven't gotten to that point where I do advocacy. But I would say that, names without, it's not just women folk. I see venture capital firms of people of a certain gender, of a certain age, and of a certain race. And they like to invest in other people of a certain race as well. So because sometimes Asia is very heterogeneous in their approach. But a couple of heartening places. I'll tell you this straight up: Philippines. There are a lot of women folk who are literally running, the household. The society there is quite very women-led, and also Thailand. And we just invested in a very strong sort of female founder. So I think you just have to keep your eyes open. And in certain countries, they actually have, women are just decision makers in the household, and they don't have that much of a lens. But in certain other countries, then you can see it's very clearly it's very, very male dominated role. So I can't control my environment. So all I can do is to control the vehicle that I can control, which is my investment vehicle, to try and have as diverse a viewpoint from day one. I think that's a very core strategy of this is why we call ourselves open space, always charging into open new ideas, always being open and transparent, and always trying to be open to new perspectives. That's why we call it.
Yeah. So we're getting a ton of really good questions, but I wanted to switch the conversation a little bit to LPs. And I think, well, before I do that, Heather or Claire, did you want to comment on? Okay, so I wanted to switch the conversation a little bit to LPs, and I think, I've been, since I joined as a partner in a venture capital fund in Egypt that is focused on fintech, in all my conversations with LPs that we're raising money from, no one has ever asked specifically issues related to gender, or are we going to make sure that we see an even ratio between female or male founders? I haven't seen that it's on their radar, even with some of the larger DFIs. So I'd love to ask all of you, what responsibility do you think LPs should be playing in this? And also, what has been your experience with LPs? And then I have a specific question for Heather and Claire as well. Who would like to join? Heather, you took your mic off. Please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think to be honest, LPs are one of the core issues behind this problem. And I mean, again, we've been fundraising now. We did our first close in February, and everyone said, people had been asking me for years, why don't you have your own fund? Why don't you have your own fund? And I said, because I hate fundraising. I don't want to fundraise. I'd much rather have an angel group and invest my own money, but I hate fundraising. But then I was kind of like, okay, after I saw so many of the great entrepreneurs who I'd backed get their angel round in, but not be able to get access to institutional funding. I just said, we've got to change this. This is the next frontier. I mean, we've got to figure out how to level the playing field, because if you can't raise the next, money from VCs, you're dead, right? So yeah, but I've just been blown away by how difficult it is with the LPs. I mean, I would say the majority of them, if not all of them, are men. And that doesn't mean that they're necessarily not going to back female fund managers, but it does make it a lot harder. I think we face the same issues and challenges that the female founders face about, unconscious bias. And just, I think a lot of them just don't believe me. I'm constantly being asked about track record. And again, I've invested in 100 companies. My partners have invested in over 200. Like, our track record is undeniable. We've had exits, we've maneuvered secondary sales. In MENA, where it's very difficult, we're at over a 3x in 4 years of investing, which again, it's not, we've done better than most of the other regional funds. So yeah, it's really tough. And I think back to sort of why this happens structurally, I think 90% of emerging managers or female fund managers are emerging managers, and it's very hard, I think, for emerging managers to access funding. But this is where this past week, I don't know, Claire, if you were on it, but I just was on the 100 Women in Finance. They had like a fundraising platform for female fund managers, and these are all big institutions. I knew that they weren't going to back us because, again, we're too small and too new for them. We don't tick their boxes, but still, I think they've got to make changes in the way they invest if they really want to change the landscape. And often the people I'm talking to, if they are women, they're junior, they're not decision makers they're not the CIOs, they're not the partners. And then the family offices, especially in emerging markets, I think this is another big challenge. They want like private equity types of structures and returns. So we went through 9 months of hell with one family office that I was sure was going to come in, only to find out that they were concerned, after several meetings and discussions, being on our data room and everything, that basically our companies are not near profitability. And we're investing early stage. We're doing like bridge between seed and Series A rounds. Of course, our companies are Facebook. Like, it's like, come on. It's a ridiculous comment from someone who's looking at a VC fund. So I think the other thing, that's the other piece, is just a lack of understanding of VC as an asset class.
Yeah. Adam, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about LPs.
Oh yeah, sure. Thank you. So we're seeing certainly a trend right now that that requires, at the very least, certain reporting to be done, and we do a lot of reporting using B impact rating assessment tools. So there's at the very least that, but we also have some LPs that are much more even proactive than that, and we have one LP in particular that the entire thesis of their work is research done with Stanford to quantify and remove bias from decision-making in venture. That's their entire thesis of the LP. And they hold a specific experience program. That's a 3-day program every year on bias reduction that we actually participate in. So we're starting to see a lot more LP involvement, at the very least on the reporting side, but also on the proactive side.
Good, that's wonderful. Any other comments, Claire, Hian, before we move on? Go ahead, Claire.
Yeah, I would say that, oh, sorry, Claire, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, Hian.
Okay. Yeah, I would say, obviously, I have single-handedly pulled the teeth out of all the investor relations, that we've had to do, because we started as a first-time fund, 7 years ago, and I'm on fund 3. Still, you have to pull the teeth out. It's just challenging. And a lot of our fund, of our LPs are endowments and private equity, sort of endowments and fund of funds. And those guys are very returns driven. But there's also a class of DFIs, right, who are very focused on ESG. And those are actually a very good source of capital for us now as well. I would say ADB, Asian Development Bank, IFC, they're very focused on that. One of our fund of funds who takes money and aggregates it for venture. So that's a US-based institution. The conversation with that firm, we usually do disclose not only other metrics, but gender diversity and leadership in our companies. And so we have a German DFI who does that. So if you don't have that lens, I think, when you talk to those folks, they take those things into serious consideration. But ultimately, I think your fund performance also has to stack up. And so what we try to do is to have, Jacqueline's actually on this chat, on this call now. And so she's giving me all the tips right now on that. But we run a sort of a dual lens where we are performance driven, but we also want to make sure that we also have all the other diversity elements and the ESG and corporate governance, especially in Asia, corporate governance being very, very critical.
Yeah, fantastic.
So yeah.
That's actually very positive. So I want to end with one last question, and then open it up and bring in some of the questions from the group. We've discussed a lot of statistics and data that is very troubling, and I think we should all be concerned. But I want to bring the conversation back to the role of venture capital in general, right? So venture capital is really kind of that first beginning step for any entrepreneur. And I think venture capitalists have a huge role to play in shaping societies and shaping the evolution of our private sector. And I'm curious to know your thoughts on, are you optimistic about venture capital playing a much more proactive role in shaping our societies and economies to be ones that are truly more inclusive and sustainable? Because to date, I think that what I'm seeing is there are a handful of venture capitalists who are really starting to understand that they have a role to play and that they have agency, specifically as a result of COVID-19 and the global pandemic. And at the Legatum Center, we've had a number of conversations with different venture capitalists around the world. And I think a lot of venture capitalists that I've been talking to are taking a step back and saying, were we really investing our money the right way to begin with? Were we really investing to see true systems change happen? So I'd love to hear your thoughts before we open up from the audience, just more broadly. Do you see venture capitalists stepping into that role? Claire, go ahead.
Sure. So I think it's important to remember here that, venture capital, the way the word in Spanish is just high risk capital, right? Which is something we know, but sometimes it's easy to forget. And oftentimes it's the riskiest things that we do that are the early things that sort of shift the needle in terms of societal changes and social impact. I'll give a personal example. So I live in Argentina. Argentina right now is in a situation of extreme hyperinflation. We've got about 50% annual inflation right now. It's crazy. It's, a shocking experience for me as someone who is sort of biculturally US citizen. And I was talking to a friend recently who's also in VC and LATAM, and we were just talking about some of the incredible fintech opportunities that are really available this year in particular, right? Simply because you're seeing such incredible resilience in fintech, especially in an emerging market like this. And, he was saying, it's so interesting. I would say the average grandma on the streets of Buenos Aires knows more about currency trading than, the best broker on Wall Street. And I laughed, and it's 100% true, right? And I feel like it's just a small example of how the type of resilience and the type of innovation that you get, particularly in emerging markets, is so forward thinking and so has such potential to make big ultimate changes in this world. And it's really great that venture capital is poised to take advantage of risky stuff. So I do think we can be positive. We just need to keep pushing that needle.
Yeah. Anybody else want to jump in real quick? Adam?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I would say Singapore is very metric driven, especially the government. So I was just talking to the Prime Minister's office the other day with a whole bunch of venture capitalists. And I created a page and saying, like, even though we control, $350 million, our portfolio companies raise $11 billion. A lot of them are in Singapore. The venture to me is a force leverage. It's a catalyst that, it's the seed that if you don't have that thing, you just cannot create a lot of the different industries that are needed for the next 30, 40 years. How many more trees can we cut down in Southeast Asia? How many more, things how many more mines that can we create? And, especially in a place like Indonesia, we've seen how we operate. When we invested in that penetration was, in the teens in Indonesia, it's like 6-7%. There's an absolute transformation. And the number one beneficiary, the lower class, middle class, large proportion of those decision makers have been women folk. And the ability for them to do micro payments from loans, it's just a forced leverage. And so we're very excited. Of course, if you're in Silicon Valley, you're trying to make Terminator or something. So it doesn't apply to them, but to us, it is just by definition extremely meaningful, and it just becomes a natural part of our business.
Yeah. Adam, you want to make a quick comment? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I have to say that I couldn't agree more with Claire and her point around the emerging markets, which are sometimes thought of as almost laggards, are in so many ways actually ahead of the established markets in certain ways. And that is, I think, a topic of discussion. Dina, I'd love to be able to get involved in some future topic or panel. But certainly the role of women in entrepreneurship, I think, is something that may be led actually by the emerging markets and followed by the established markets. But we've spent some time talking about some troubling numbers earlier in this discussion. Let's talk about the flip side. Some numbers that are actually showing some encouragement. First, women, as many of you I'm sure know, women are considered the next emerging market in and of themselves, with specific markets that they're involved in going from 13 to 18 trillion dollars, and that incremental $5 trillion is almost twice the expected growth of the GDP in China and India combined. You have something that not all husbands want to hear, but women will control close to 75% of discretionary spending worldwide. In the US, women-owned firms are growing at more than double the rate of all other firms, and they contribute nearly $3 trillion to the economy and are directly responsible for 23 million jobs. In Africa, the number of women involved in founding startups is estimated to be 24% and are contributing to $250 to $300 billion back to the African economic growth, which is about 13% of the continent's GDP. And women are the fastest rising, I think, population of entrepreneurs worldwide. So, you know, when you look at that and you look at the fact that female entrepreneurs are especially in the emerging markets, generally have a lower fear of failure, and they think more positively about entrepreneurship as a career choice as compared to women from the developed economies. We're seeing, while we have a long way to go, we're seeing some things to celebrate, and you know, things to continue to motivate us to continue this journey.
Thanks, Adam. I'm going to switch to ask them questions. Sorry, Hian, I'm going to, I feel like you wanted to say something, but I'm going to bring in some questions from the audience now. One question is, adding to some of Claire, your data points, countries with women leaders fared better with COVID. Corporate boards with a larger prevalence of women directors have been more effective. So as 2020 is the year of diversity, equity, and inclusion, how can we remove what have become structural barriers so that it should be a meritocracy? Anybody want to take that on?
That's a big question. I think the first thing I would push back on is this idea that we're actually striving for a meritocracy. I don't actually think a meritocracy is realistic. There is, or maybe it just never really exists, right? We are all starting at such different places in life because of our histories, because of our backgrounds, because of the centuries of institutional bias in our societies or in our countries, that's not really realistic. So I think it's important to kind of stop talking about meritocracy as if it's really based on merit. And I think maybe when we start having more conversations like this, where we call things out, we can, you know, slowly over time make some change. I'm really sad that some of the numbers have not changed in the last 12 years, but I am encouraged that some things are shifting.
Yeah. So we have another question from Dalila Khaled, who is actually a very new partner in a fund. And she's asking, how can the various stakeholders in the VC space do a better job of identifying and cultivating the pipeline of investable women-led companies in emerging markets? What types of models are working, and what new models of cooperation do we need to accelerate the linkage of funding with viable women-led businesses? I feel like Heather wants, maybe, or.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think we just need new models of investing. So, you know, the traditional VC of kind of, you know, some of the Silicon Valley guys I talked to, you've got to be 15 miles within your house, and you know, those are the only portfolio companies they invest in. So I was having lunch with the founder of Canaan Partners last summer, and he didn't believe in our model where we're very decentralized. I mean, I think there's a lot of data points and just studies of kind of masculine and feminine archetypes. So not necessarily men or women, because some men are more feminine, some women are more masculine, but basically the different ways of even decision making. You know, the masculine model is highly centralized, highly hierarchical. The feminine is decentralized and much more equal, or more, you know, flat in terms of power and decision making. And that's really, we adopt a very feminine way of acting at our fund. So our venture partners are all around the world. We don't need to be in the same place. I mean, I think virtually now with COVID, we've got Hian, an investment company in Singapore called Shiok Meets. And, you know, we've met the founders once, one of our venture partners, but I think just the whole world is very different, you know, thanks to technology. I mean, without the internet, none of this would be possible, right? So, but again, we're not in the 1980s, we're in 2020. So I think these new models, you know, venture and the way that we invest and support founders should be kind of being disrupted as well, right? And that's what we invest in. So why are we as investors not also being disrupted in the way that we invest?
Yeah. Another question is, what is the usual timeline of reaching out towards venture capitalists, business angels before securing a starting amount for the creation of a startup company? And what are the prerequisites to be presented besides a well-established business plan? I think that's more of a general question for all venture capitalists. Anybody want to take a go at that? Adam, go ahead.
Sure. I mean,
Can I?
Yeah, Hian, go ahead.
Go ahead, Hian.
Okay, I have a different perspective, which is, that's too structured. It's a very relationship business. All of us see so many presentations. You really got to find where these people actually live. Like, if you bump into me at a conference and you make an impression, I just think it's a very human business. A lot of decision making is driven by heuristics, emotions, and stuff like that. So it's really, really hard. Find yourself a good mentor. Find yourself good angels. Those angels will find the network. Find yourself the people at MIT who believe in you. They will make the phone calls. They'll say, Hian, you got to have a look at this. Adam, it's this. If you don't look at this thing, you're gonna miss a big one. Heather, this person's an unbelievable female founder. That's how you do investing, and that's how I raised because I was an entrepreneur first. I made 32 cold calls, and I just got my first check in. And the first check was a guy who just eyeballed me and said, all right, we'll give you $100,000. You go start up your TV network. And I started up a TV network.
Yeah. Adam, you wanted to.
Oh, I think Hian covered a lot of the points. There are a lot of mechanics that I don't want to take up airtime from this important discussion that are focusing on women entrepreneurship in emerging markets, but it really heavily depends on the space. It depends on how much feasibility data you need to generate to show you have a technology and a feasible business model. So there's so many other factors. The one factor that's consistent is what Hian mentioned. Right? That's the one factor that's not dependent on space and vertical. It's the criticality of the passion, the drive, and the component that really gives you a high level of confidence in investing in the person and the leadership team.
Yeah. So another question is, in designing gender lens strategies to improve your investment process, do you consult female founders in that process? If yes, how? Can you share an example of inclusion or co-creation that actually took place?
I can jump in a little bit on this one. So, let me first preface that at Material Impact, we're kind of diverse by definition. So if you look at the makeup of our own core team, even though I'm of North African origin, I'm considered the token white guy on the team. So, the rest of our team, comprises women, Asian, African American, or combinations thereof. And so we bring that diversity almost in an integrated, seamless fashion anyway. But I will tell you, you mentioned one question, I think earlier, Dino, you mentioned a comment, excuse me, regarding our investment in one of the Legatum Center's outputs, Bloomer Tech. And specifically regarding Bloomer Tech, I made a conscious decision that our thesis in healthcare, for example, is exclusively going to be focused on women's health. And we're in that process, we had already made one investment led by an amazing entrepreneur, Ridi Tarial of Next Gen Jane, who's working on a very disruptive technology for reproductive health.
Such a cool company.
It is, isn't it? Oh, I'm glad I'm glad you know. And so Ridi, was involved when I was looking at Bloomer Tech, and with Bloomer Tech, I didn't look at Bloomer Tech. That's not the way we operate. I actually worked with the incredible founders of Alicia Chong and Asil Halaby. I worked with them for a year and a half before we actually invested. But through that process, Ridi was involved. Some of the members of our close circle of female entrepreneurs like Deb Kilpatrick one of the women entrepreneurs of the year in the Silicon Valley was involved. So yes, to your point, a lot of them were involved in helping us look at this. But at the end of the day, we are so proud to be standing shoulder to shoulder with entrepreneurs like Bloomer Tech and NextGen Jane that are really making transformative changes to women's health.
Yes, and we are very grateful that they are doing that and that you're supporting them.
Heather, can I add one point on that question? So I actually think it's all about intentionality and measurement. So again, I hear a lot of funds or investors say, yeah, we're interested in diversity. We're interested. Yeah, of course, we want to back women and da da da. But then, I mean, unless you really have a very, very defined way to measure that, what does that mean? And that's part of why we're pretty. I mean, we get asked a lot by LPs. Well, what if there's a great great company that you miss because it's an all-male team, your gender lens where you've got to have at least one female founder who's operational in the business, that, you'll miss that deal. And our answer is always, there are lots of other good deals that we're going to be in. So really it's about, it's a portfolio construction strategy, it's investment thesis, it's all of the things that, I mean, I'm sure all of us feel this, but you've got to do what you say you're going to do. So, and that comes back to setting out very intentional ways to prove that you are doing what you say you believe and value, and then having a way to measure that, and then show that back to LPs and even to yourself. So, we get questions. Sometimes we'll have we get in these quandaries where it's like, should we measure the amount of equity that the female founder owns? There's also this token founder equity, which I'm sure a lot of us have seen as well. I mean, literally, we were looking at a company in Kenya that was a fintech, and 3 founders, 1 woman, 2 men. The woman was actually the CTO, which, of course, in a fintech is really, really a critical role. And we looked at the cap table. This is they're about to raise Series A. She owned 1% of the equity, which was just unbelievable. The 2 guys owned all the rest of the equity at that point. So we said no, because it said, you tick our boxes in terms of the female founder, but come on, 1%, that's a joke. Unless you're willing to increase that to 30%, we're not going to do it. So yeah, back to intentionality and then actually doing what you say you're going to do.
So Heather, really, really quick question, and then I'll ask all of you one last question, and then we'll wrap up. Heather, what do you think is the most effective tool, litmus test, or metric to move VC away from the false biases, race, and gender limitations, and move towards impact and merit? How do we raise the floor on VC practices while also raising the ceiling? And I'll ask you to be very, very brief.
It's a really hard question. I think again, creating clear metrics. So, and I think the LPs have to do that as well. They've got to change their metrics and find ways to really. I mean, there are lots of. I know you guys were talking about DFIs, but I see it over and over again where they just keep investing in the same VCs. We shared these stories with them of women who, if you look closely over the last 2 years, they can't keep a woman in even an associate role. But the guys who are making these investment making decisions keep backing those VCs. So I think, again, back to the insanity thing, doing things differently, and what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, thank you, Heather. So we do unfortunately need to wrap up. I'm going to give you the floor immediately to wrap up, Hian. I think it is Women's Entrepreneurship Day, and I think we still have a lot of work to do, for sure. We do have a lot to celebrate, and I wanted to ask, final question to all of you to wrap up in your final remarks. Today, it's, the year is ending. It's been a tough year, really tough year with a global pandemic, but what are you hopeful about moving forward when it comes to this space? What is one critical opportunity that you see out there that we can all embrace and rally around as we exit this really tough year and grapple with some of the tough statistics and data that we've also seen today? Hian, please take the floor. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think we change the world when we tell stories. And we've got to create more great stories of people who are successful women founders. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a Singaporean entrepreneur. We're very rare. They're like the dodo. If you listen to Lee Kuan Yew, it's the most risk-averse society. So forget about female founders, just entrepreneurs. And I backed, just please go Google this lady, Rachel from Love Bonito. And they're an e-commerce clothing company, backed 100% women. When I invested, they only had 3 men folk in the organization. That was the IT team. The rest of them were all women folk. So we had a gender diversity issue there. And when the COVID hit, everyone's retail business was just hit, and they had retail stores, everyone's hit. Rachel, she started doing webcasts, inspiring stories. She brought other women folk. She just kept the brand going. Today, they have bounced back. They've increased their revenues. Such ingenuity, I don't think I would have thought of that. So I think we just need more stories. And I told Rachel and I told Viola and all the other founders, I said, I don't need to be successful for this generation. You guys need to be successful, or else society is not going to change. Singapore is not going to change. Southeast Asia is not going to change. And that's actually the truth as to why I'm a venture capitalist, because I feel like we can do much more than just being an entrepreneur. I can touch more lives. I can bring more capital in the region. And it will take decades, but it will change. So I'm very optimistic. And COVID is just another disaster. Disasters will happen. I had the global financial crisis. You just have to be resilient. You just have to push through.
That's right.
It's just life.
Heather.
I'm really optimistic about the next gen. So I think they're really different. I think COVID and just the experience that they've had, this is like kind of 18 and under. I think they're really going to change this world. And so I'm very hopeful about them, their values. I think that, they're ubiquitous, so they're always online, always connected, and they actually make the hard decisions that I think the older generations, rationalized and got us partly into this mess with climate crisis. But I think this next generation is very different, and they're gonna make the world a lot better.
So wait for your boys to take on the reins, huh?
Yeah.
Adam.
They're feminist vegans, so yeah.
That's right, your sons are feminist vegans. True. Amazing boys. Adam.
Well, maybe I'm a hopeless romantic and overly optimistic here, but I actually think that instead of thinking about things despite COVID, we should think about things because of COVID. And I think that it takes sometimes, when you're on a trajectory that is concerning, it takes things to shake it up a little bit, to perturb it and push it on a different trajectory. And I think that, COVID is an opportunity for us to reset the playing field in so many different ways, reset our values, and we're seeing that. And, specifically, for example, we're seeing that we're coming out of, the COVID crisis with an eye towards how to make societies more resilient. And it also seems to be a general space where women entrepreneurs are thriving. We're also seeing that because of COVID, we're having more and more Zoom type of discussions with entrepreneurs. And guess what? That actually helps female founders who sometimes can't travel because they have children and are more, have more access now to pitching to venture capitalists. This is an opportunity to reset the playing field, and so let's seize it.
Yes, could not agree more. Claire, are you going to take us home today?
Yeah, I think I kind of want to just say everything Adam just said, but say that I said it instead. I am such a...
Well, men do that a lot,
That's funny. I am in so much agreement of that. We have seen so much change in the pandemic as a VC looking at new industries, right? For example, one of my friends has a daycare services company, Winnie, that recently raised a $9 million Series A. And, she 5 years ago when she was starting to raise, people told her this kind of business was not investable, right? And we've obviously seen all kinds of ed tech and preschool and daycare solutions blow up up this year, right? So when it comes to how women entrepreneurs or women investors or women in business are going to change after the pandemic, I really think there is so much to be said about the future of work kind of taking us to a new normal. And, you know, I'll just end with one quick story. I remember the last time I went on a business travel experience was up to Slush in Finland. It's a huge tech conference. And I remember being at a dinner of female founders, and a woman was, you know, really upset. She was a mom of a couple kids, and she really wanted to be a founder. And Antler, one of the accelerator programs, had given her an offer, but she said, it's just impossible. How am I going to move to Stockholm for 2 months with 2 little kids, right? And I said, you know, I'm so sorry. A few months later, I heard from her again, and she said, you know, things are opening up for me now because of the virtual world. And in that same week, I spoke to a founder who had a really successful raise after Y Combinator. And she said, you know, the entire reason I could do Y Combinator this year is because it was remote. So I think we've created new opportunities. We just need to make sure that we don't go completely back to the way things were before, and, you know, find our new normal so that we can really create some, you know, resilience innovation out of this 2020 hellscape.
Yeah, could not agree more. And I just wanted to thank you all for taking the time this morning. And, you know, being an entrepreneur, male or female, is always a really tough journey. And I also think that being a venture capitalist is also a tough journey, right? But all of which are fulfilling. And I really appreciate all of you sharing your time.
No sympathy.
And your knowledge, no sympathy. I think it's all it's a tough but great journey as an entrepreneur myself, as an investor myself, and also somebody who's leading a center that is working with a multitude of entrepreneurs from emerging markets. It's a privilege, and it's an incredibly hopeful space. And, you know, I couldn't agree more with all of you that this has been a year that has presented us with many opportunities to level the playing field and to really change things. And it is an amazing opportunity. So thank you all, and thank you to the audience for attending. We will be sharing this again on social media. And I look forward to more conversations with all of you. Having all of you in the VC space, I think, is a wonderful thing for the world and for the regions that you work in. So thank you also for all that you do for your portfolio companies and all that you do to advocate for better practices.
Thank you, Dina.
Good night, Hian. I know it's very late for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dina,
Have a
for
great day,
having us.
everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.